Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the Great Hall of Harmony Prime, watching 12 alien species decide humanity's fate. The massive space station hung in the void between star systems, its crystal walls gleaming with soft light. For over a century, this place had been the center of galactic peace. Today it felt more like a courtroom. The emergency session had been called after 3 worlds fell to the Devourers. These creatures were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. They ate entire planets, turning green worlds into dead rock in just weeks. The survivors who escaped told horrible stories of cities melting and oceans boiling. Speaker Veltar raised one of his forearms for silence. The tall Altarian's skin shifted from blue to deep purple, showing his stress. His voice echoed through the chamber like wind through crystal caves. "The Council must decide how to respond to this threat," Veltar announced. "Admiral Morrison of Earth has requested to present humanity's position." Jake stepped forward, his dress uniform crisp and clean. Behind him sat Dr. Lisa Hayes, Earth's top expert on alien life. Her tablet glowed with data about the Devourers that made his stomach turn. 3 billion dead in just 2 months. "Honored Council," Jake began, his voice steady. "We've studied the attack patterns. The Devourers aren't random. They're testing our defenses, learning our weaknesses. Every day we wait, they get stronger." He activated the holographic display. Red dots showed Devourer positions forming a line toward the galaxy's core worlds. Blue dots marked potential targets with billions of innocent lives. "We must strike their staging grounds now before they can launch their main assault. My fleet is ready to move within hours." The chamber erupted in angry clicks, whistles, and electronic sounds. The Xanthari delegate, a creature that looked like a walking tree with too many eyes, spoke first. "This is exactly why humanity should never have joined the Council," it said through its translator device. "You see only violence. You are warmongers who dress bloodlust as protection." The Catherian representative, a blob of intelligent gas contained in a floating sphere, agreed. "Peace has kept our world safe for 800 years. We will not abandon it now because humans are afraid." Jake felt his jaw tighten. "Afraid? 3 worlds are gone. 30 billion people turned to ash. How is that peace?" Dr. Hayes leaned forward. "The biological data is clear. These creatures can't be reasoned with. They don't communicate. They only consume. Diplomacy won't work because they see us as food, not equals." But the Council had already made up their minds. One by one, each species voted for diplomatic contact with the Devourers. The Quellans believed any species could be taught peace. The Vorthak insisted that violence only bred more violence. Even the warrior-like Dakari claimed that honor demanded trying words before weapons. Only humanity voted for immediate military action. Speaker Veltar's skin shifted to angry red. "Admiral Morrison, will Earth comply with the Council's decision to pursue diplomatic solutions?" Jake looked around the chamber at species that had lived in peace so long, they'd forgotten what real danger looked like. These creatures had never faced extinction. They thought the universe was reasonable because they'd made it so through careful treaties and gentle words. "No," Jake said quietly. "I won't recall my fleets from the border zones. Those ships are all that stand between the Devourers and 20 more worlds." The silence stretched like a held breath. Veltar rose to his full height, nearly 3 meters tall. "Then you leave the Council no choice. By refusing to embrace peaceful coexistence, humanity has proven it cannot be part of our great alliance. Earth is hereby expelled from the Galactic Peacekeeping Council." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. Around the chamber, alien faces showed satisfaction, relief, even smugness. They thought they were removing a cancer from their perfect society. "All human colonies must withdraw from Council-protected space within 1 solar year," Veltar continued. "Trade agreements are nullified. Diplomatic immunity is revoked. Earth stands alone." Dr. Hayes grabbed Jake's arm as he started to step forward. She knew that look. He wanted to tell them exactly what he thought of their decision, but angry words wouldn't save the 300 million humans living in Council space. "You're making a mistake," Jake said instead. "When those creatures come for your core worlds, when your children are burning, remember that you chose this." He turned and walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the silent chamber. Dr. Hayes followed, along with Captain Ben Carter and the rest of Earth's delegation. Behind them, the Council was already moving on to other business as if humanity had never existed. In the corridor outside, Ben grabbed Jake's shoulder. "Sir, what are our orders?" Jake stared out the viewport at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Devourers were building their strength for the next attack. Earth's fleets were all that stood in their way, and now those fleets had to protect an entire exodus. "Get me a secure channel to Earth Command," Jake said. "Tell them to begin Operation Wanderer. We're going home." Lisa checked her tablet, running calculations. 340 million people to evacuate. 67 colonies and research stations. It's the largest migration in galactic history. "Can it be done?" Ben asked. Jake watched a council patrol ship drift past the station. Soon those same ships would be hunting human vessels, seizing abandoned colonies, erasing every trace of humanity's century-long partnership with the galaxy. "It has to be done," Jake replied, "because when the council finally realizes they need us, we're going to be strong enough to make them beg." The three humans walked toward their shuttle in silence. Behind them, the council chamber glowed with the soft light of species that had never learned the hardest truth in the universe. Sometimes, the only way to preserve peace is to prepare for war. As their shuttle departed Harmony Prime, Jake looked back one last time at the station where humanity's galactic citizenship had died. The next time he saw this place, he promised himself, things would be very different. The exile had begun. 8 months after the exile decree, the greatest migration in galactic history was in full swing. General Rick Stone stood in the command center on Luna, watching hundreds of red dots move across the star map. Each dot represented thousands of human lives racing against time and hostile fleets. "Status report," Rick called to his aide, a young lieutenant named Amy Foster. 43 colonies evacuated successfully, 24 still in progress. "Council enforcement fleets are getting bolder, sir. They tried to intercept the convoy from Kepler Station yesterday." Rick nodded grimly. The council claimed they just wanted to ensure orderly withdrawal, but everyone knew better. They wanted to seize human technology and infrastructure before the colonies could be stripped bare. On the other side of the galaxy, Ambassador Kate Walsh was coordinating the civilian evacuation efforts. Her job was the hardest of all, convincing families to leave homes they'd built over generations. Some colonies had been human for over 80 years. "Mrs. Patterson, I understand your feelings," Kate said to the elderly woman on her screen, "but the council has made it clear. Any humans remaining in their space after the deadline will be arrested." The woman's face crumpled. "My husband is buried here. Our children were born here. How do we just leave everything behind?" Kate had heard this conversation hundreds of times, and it never got easier. "We're not leaving everything behind. We're taking what matters most, each other. The rest can be rebuilt." Meanwhile, Dr. Lisa Hayes was making a discovery that would change everything. She stood in the ruins of an ancient city on Kepler 442b, the research colony's last site before evacuation. The structures were clearly alien, but unlike anything in the council databases. "These aren't just ruins," she told her assistant, engineer Paul Davis, over the comm. "This whole complex is a library. Look at these symbols." The walls were covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift in the light. Paul ran his scanner over them, frowning at the readings. "Doc, these aren't just decorations. They're technical blueprints. Weapons designs, ship schematics, tactical manuals. This whole place is a military archive." Lisa felt her pulse quicken. "Military archive of what species?" "Unknown. But whoever built this, they were warriors. Everything here is designed for conquest, for building empires. The technology is centuries ahead of anything the Council has." Back in Council space, Captain Ben Carter was proving that human tactical thinking was already evolving. His small escort fleet was playing a deadly game of cat and mouse with a Zenthari battle group, trying to seize the abandoned mining station at Ross 128. "They expect us to fight like the Council species," Ben told his tactical officer. "Stand in formation, trade shots until someone breaks. We're not going to do that." His plan was simple and brutal. The mining station's ore processors could be overloaded to create massive explosions. The cargo haulers could be packed with debris and sent on collision courses. Even the maintenance robots could be armed with cutting tools. When the Zenthari ships moved in to claim their prize, they found a trap worthy of ancient Earth pirates. Exploding asteroids ramming attacks, and weapons hidden in civilian equipment turned what should have been an easy capture into a nightmare. "Human ships are retreating," the Zenthari commander reported to his fleet. "Station is secured." Then the mining laser, modified far beyond safety limits, cut his flagship in half. The biggest challenge was yet to come. Commander Sam Torres stood on the bridge of the colony ship New Frontier, looking at the impossible task ahead. New Geneva, humanity's largest colony, held 50 million people. Getting them all off-world and through the dangerous Void Nebula would require a miracle. "Sir, we've got 17 council ships moving to intercept," his navigation officer reported. "They're demanding we surrender the colony infrastructure intact." Sam smiled coldly. "Tell them we'll comply with all council regulations regarding colonial transfer procedures." What the council didn't know was that New Geneva had been built inside the shell of an ancient asteroid. The entire colony could move if necessary. They just never thought it would be. The evacuation fleet looked like a ragged collection of cargo haulers, passenger liners, and converted mining ships. The council forces saw easy prey. They were wrong. As the interceptors moved in, New Geneva's massive fusion engines ignited. The entire asteroid began to move, escorted by hundreds of ships that suddenly revealed hidden weapons and military-grade shields. "This is impossible," the lead council commander transmitted. "Civilian vessels cannot have military capabilities." "Every human is a civilian until they need to be a soldier," Sam replied. "Today we all need to be soldiers." The running battle through the Void Nebula lasted 18 hours. Human ships used the nebula's interference to vanish and reappear like ghosts, striking from unexpected angles. Mining charges became missiles. Cargo containers became decoy targets. Even passenger shuttles joined the fight, using their superior maneuverability to confuse enemy sensors. When the battered council fleet finally gave up the chase, 50 million humans and their entire city were safely on their way to the galactic rim. The exodus was changing humanity in ways no one expected. Dr. Hayes studied the alien archives night and day, unlocking secrets that the peaceful council species would never seek. General Stone organized the scattered colonies into a unified command structure. Ambassador Walsh turned refugee camps into the foundation of a new civilization. Most importantly, they were learning that exile might not be punishment, it might be freedom. On the harsh world of Iron's Edge, chosen as humanity's new capital, Admiral Jake Morrison watched the last refugee ship land. The planet's surface was scarred by cosmic storms and littered with valuable minerals. The Council had declared it worthless because it couldn't support their peaceful lifestyle. Humans were already building cities in the storm valleys and mining complexes in the radioactive mountains. "Status report," Jake asked his aide. "All colonies successfully evacuated, sir. 340 million citizens relocated to the Rim territories. 0 casualties from Council interference." Jake allowed himself a small smile. "And our military assets?" "Hidden in asteroid fields throughout the Rim. The Council thinks we've retreated with our civilian population. They have no idea we're building the largest fleet in galactic history." Outside the command center, human children played in the ruins of ancient alien structures, already making this hostile world their home. Their parents worked day and night, turning exile into opportunity. The Great Exodus was complete. But for humanity, this wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. 5 years had passed since humanity's exile, and the galactic rim was no longer the empty wasteland the Council remembered. Director Alex Murphy stood before the massive construction site carved into the asteroid field of Sigma 7, watching humanity's future take shape. "How many ships can the yards produce per month?" he asked engineer Paul Davis, who had become his top specialist in the alien technology they'd found. "With the new architect fabrication systems online, we can build 50 heavy cruisers and 200 fighters monthly. The automated systems work faster than anything the Council has." Alex nodded, studying the technical readouts. The architect race had been warriors, but they were also brilliant engineers. Their technology didn't just make weapons, it made weapons that could build better weapons. Dr. Lisa Hayes joined them at the observation deck, her face tired but excited. "We've cracked another section of the archives. Paul, you need to see this." She activated a holographic display showing complex ship designs. These weren't just warships. They were mobile factories capable of converting raw materials into fleets while traveling between star systems. The architects called it the Swarm Doctrine, Lisa explained. "One mothership can produce an entire battle fleet in 6 months, using nothing but asteroid materials and solar energy." Paul whistled softly. No wonder they conquered half the galaxy. They could fight in places where normal fleets couldn't even supply themselves. Meanwhile, on the training world of Devil's Forge, Colonel Nina Brooks was creating something the galaxy had never seen: Human soldiers enhanced with architect biotechnology. The planet's surface temperature reached 200 degrees during the day and dropped to -100 at night. Gravity was twice Earth normal, and the atmosphere could kill an unprotected human in minutes. It was perfect for making warriors. Move, move, move. Nina shouted at her trainees as they ran through the flame valleys. The men and women wore powered armor that would have been impossible without architect technology. It made them stronger, faster, and nearly indestructible. Private Dan Miller stumbled and fell, his armor smoking from the heat. His sergeant, a tough woman named Beth Rogers, hauled him to his feet. "You think the Devourers will wait for you to catch your breath?" Beth snapped. "They eat planets for breakfast. If you can't handle a little heat, you'll be their lunch." Dan gritted his teeth and kept running. Around him, 2,000 other humans pushed themselves beyond normal limits. They were becoming something new, not just soldiers, but weapons of war shaped by exile and hardened by necessity. Back in Council space, the situation was getting worse every day. The Devourers had consumed 2 more worlds while the diplomatic missions achieved nothing. The creatures didn't respond to any form of communication. They simply ate everything in their path and moved on to the next target. Speaker Veltar stood in an emergency session, his skin flickering between colors as stress overwhelmed his emotional controls. Reports came in from across Council territory, refugee camps overflowing, economies collapsing under the strain, and military forces stretched beyond their limits. "Perhaps," suggested the Quellian delegate quietly, "we should reconsider our position on humanity." The chamber erupted in angry debate. Some species wanted to recall the exile and ask for human military assistance. Others insisted that humanity's aggressive nature would only make the situation worse. What none of them knew was that human spy satellites were recording every word. Intelligence Chief Tony Lewis sat in his underground command center on Iron's Edge, analyzing the intercepted communications. The man who had once been a simple cargo pilot now ran the most effective intelligence network in the galaxy. "The Council is fracturing," he reported to Admiral Morrison. "Half want us back, half blame us for the Devourer attacks. Some of the younger generation are calling for revolution against their own governments." Jake studied the reports with satisfaction. "And our defensive preparations?" 12 worlds fully fortified with architect shield generators. Hidden weapons platforms in 43 asteroid fields. The rim is now impregnable to any known technology. That was when the alert sirens began, wailing. Captain Lou Parker's deep space reconnaissance ship had detected something that made everyone's blood run cold. A Devourer scouting force was heading directly for Iron's Edge. 3 massive creatures accompanied by dozens of smaller ones. "All hands battle stations," Jake ordered throughout the system. "This is not a drill. Unknown hostile forces approaching." For the first time since their exile, humanity would face the Devourers in open battle. But they were no longer the same species that had been thrown out of the Council. 5 years of preparation, architect technology, and bitter determination had transformed them into something the galaxy had never seen. Colonel Brooks led the first wave of fighters, her enhanced soldiers piloting craft that seemed to dance through space. The Devourer scouts moved like living asteroids, but they were slow and predictable. "Target their feeding appendages," Nina ordered over the comm. "Make them bleed." The human fighters struck like angry wasps, their weapons designed specifically to hurt silicon-based lifeforms. The smaller Devourers began to break apart under the assault, their death screams echoing across subspace frequencies. But the real test came when the large Devourers reached Iron's Edge itself. These creatures were the size of small moons, their surfaces covered with grinding machinery designed to consume entire worlds. Admiral Morrison activated the planet's hidden defenses. Massive particle cannons rose from concealed positions in the storm valleys. Architect shield generators created a protective dome over the human cities. Most importantly, the new swarm ships emerged from their hiding places throughout the system. What happened next shocked even the humans. The architect technology didn't just work, it worked perfectly. The Devourers found themselves facing weapons designed by a warrior race that had fought similar enemies for centuries. In less than 6 hours, every single Devourer in the system was dead. Jake stood in the command center, looking at the tactical display showing debris fields where the enemy had been. Around him, his officers cheered and celebrated. But Jake's attention was focused on something else: the Council spy drones that had observed the entire battle. "Sir," Lieutenant Foster reported, "we're receiving priority transmissions from 17 Council worlds. They're all requesting immediate military assistance." Jake smiled grimly. 5 years ago, the Council had exiled humanity for being too warlike. Now they were begging for that same warrior spirit to save them. "Send a reply to all of them," Jake ordered. "Tell them that humanity appreciates their concern, but we're busy building an empire." The war machine was forged and tested. Now it was time to use it. 10 years after exile, humanity was no longer hiding on the galactic rim. Admiral Beth Rogers stood on the bridge of the battleship Ironwill, watching her fleet emerge from Phantom Drive near an empty star system. The technology would have seemed like magic to the Council species, ships appearing from nowhere, striking like lightning, and vanishing before the enemy could respond. "Target confirmed," her tactical officer reported. "Devourer forward base, approximately 50,000 hostiles." Beth studied the enemy position. The creatures had built a massive hive structure around the system's dead planets, turning them into breeding grounds for their next assault wave. Intelligence suggested they were planning to attack the Altarian homeworld within months. "All ships, commence Operation Cleansing Fire. Remember, no survivors, no witnesses, no second chances." The battle that followed lasted exactly 18 minutes. Human ships used coordinated phantom jumps to strike from impossible angles. Swarm fighters materialized inside the enemy base structure, tearing it apart from within. When the firing stopped, the system was empty except for radioactive debris. Back on Iron's Edge, Intelligence Chief Tony Lewis was analyzing data that would reshape galactic politics. His spy networks had grown far beyond anything the Council could imagine, with human agents operating throughout civilized space. "Sir, the reports from Council territory are getting worse," he told Admiral Morrison. "The Catherian government has collapsed. 3 Xanthari colonies are in open rebellion. Even the Altarians are seeing protest movements calling for new leadership." Jake examined the intelligence files with growing interest. The rigid Council system was falling apart under the pressure of the Devourer threat and economic collapse. Species that had lived in careful cooperation for centuries were turning on each other. "What are they protesting about?" Jake asked, us mostly. "The younger generation wants to know why their governments exiled the only species willing to fight the Devourers. There's a growing movement calling itself the human example. They want their own species to adopt our military doctrine." This was exactly what humanity had been waiting for. But the real opportunity came from Captain Lou Parker's deep reconnaissance teams. They had discovered something that would change the entire war. Lou stood before the Strategic Planning Committee, his face grim. "We found the source. The Devourer breeding ground is located in the galactic core, around a cluster of ancient neutron stars. Conservative estimate, 10 billion creatures in hibernation status." The room fell silent. Dr. Lisa Hayes ran calculations on her tablet, her face growing pale. "At their current consumption rate, they could devour the entire galaxy within 50 years, she announced. "But that's not the worst part. The energy emissions from all our civilizations are waking them up ahead of schedule." Admiral Morrison stood up slowly. "How long do we have?" "Maybe 5 years before they reach full awakening. Once that happens, nothing in the galaxy will survive." The strategic implications were staggering. Even humanity's growing empire couldn't stand against 10 billion devourers. But Jake saw an opportunity in the crisis. "We need more territory, more resources, and more manufacturing capacity," he announced. "Launch Operation Expansion. Take every uninhabited system within 50 light-years of our current borders." What followed was the fastest territorial expansion in galactic history. Human fleets using architect technology could terraform hostile worlds in months instead of decades. Swarm ships established fortified bases throughout the new territory. Within 1 year, the human empire controlled more space than the original Council. But the real shock came when Admiral Rogers received new orders for offensive operations. "Ma'am, Admiral Morrison wants us to hit 3 more Devourer bases simultaneously," her communication officer reported. "This will take us well beyond the Rim territories." Beth smiled coldly. For 10 years, humanity had been building toward this moment. They were no longer content to hide on the galaxy's edge. They were taking the war to the enemy, regardless of Council space boundaries. The triple strike was a masterpiece of coordination. 3 separate fleets used Phantom Drive technology to attack Devourer positions in different sectors of the galaxy simultaneously. Each base was destroyed completely, with no survivors to report the attacks. The Council's response was predictable: panic and confusion. Speaker Veltar called emergency sessions, demanding to know how human forces had penetrated so deeply into civilized space without detection. "This is an act of aggression," the Xanthari delegate protested. "Human ships violated our territorial sovereignty." But other voices were beginning to speak up. The Quellian representative, whose homeworld had been saved by one of the strikes, defended humanity's actions. "They eliminated a threat that we were unable to handle ourselves," she pointed out. "Perhaps we should be thanking them instead of complaining." The fractures in the Council alliance were widening into chasms. Some species wanted to negotiate with humanity for protection. Others demanded military action against the expanding human empire. A few quietly began their own military build-up programs, trying to copy human tactics. The breaking point came with humanity's greatest victory yet, the capture of Fortress Prime, the massive devourer. Command station had been discovered orbiting a black hole in the Vega sector. Council strategists had declared it impregnable due to its position in the gravity well and its powerful defenses. Several Council fleets had been destroyed trying to approach it. Admiral Rogers took a different approach. Instead of attacking the station directly, her fleet used the black hole's gravity to accelerate to impossible speeds, appearing inside the defensive perimeter before the devourers could react. "All weapons, fire at will," Beth commanded as her ships materialized around the enemy fortress. The battle was fierce but brief. Human weapons, designed specifically to hurt silicon-based life forms, tore through the station's biological armor. Swarm fighters penetrated the internal structures, hunting down every creature inside. When the smoke cleared, humanity had captured intact the Devourer's primary command and control center. The intelligence gathered from the station's data cores would revolutionize their understanding of the enemy. But more importantly, the victory demonstrated that humans had not just caught up to galactic military standards, they had surpassed them entirely. Intelligence Chief Lewis delivered the final blow to Council morale. His agents intercepted communications showing that several major Council fleets were already moving to attack human empire territory. "They're planning a coordinated strike on our outer colonies," he reported to Admiral Morrison. 12 species, 47 battle fleets. "They think they can force us back to the rim before we get any stronger." Jake looked at the tactical displays showing Council fleet movements. After 10 years of preparation, humanity faced its greatest test, but he was no longer worried about the outcome. "Send a message to all Council species," he ordered. "Tell them that any aggressive action against human empire territory will be considered an act of war. And remind them what happened to the last species that went to war with humanity." Outside his office window, the lights of Iron's Edge's industrial centers worked around the clock. Swarm ships moved through the asteroid fields, building new vessels every hour. In the deep space training facilities, a new generation of human warriors prepared for the coming conflict. The Iron Fist was extending throughout the galaxy. Soon, everyone would learn what humanity had become during their years of exile. 15 years after humanity's exile, President Claire Thompson stood in the war room of Iron's Edge, looking at a galaxy map that told the story of everything that had changed. The red zones showing human empire territory now covered 3 times more space than the original Council domains. The blue areas marking Council space were shrinking daily, eaten away by devourer attacks and internal collapse. But today brought news that would test everything humanity had become. "Madam President," Intelligence Chief Tony Lewis announced, "we're receiving an emergency transmission from Council space. A single ship, heavily damaged, requesting permission to land." Claire studied the tactical display. In the 15 years since exile, no Council ship had approached human territory without hostile intent. This had to be something extraordinary. "Who is it?" "Council Envoy Zarath of the Xanthari Diplomatic Corps. Her ship appears to be the only survivor of a convoy that was completely destroyed by devourer forces." Claire remembered that name. Zarath had been one of the loudest voices calling for humanity's exile. The irony was bitter. The same species that had branded humans as warmongers was now coming to them for help. The Xanthari envoy was brought to the presidential palace under heavy guard. Claire had expected to face a proud alien still convinced of Council superiority. Instead, she found a broken creature whose tree-like form was scarred by weapon burns. and whose multiple eyes held the hollow look of someone who had witnessed the end of everything. President Thompson, Zareth said through her translator device, I come before you not as a representative of the Council, but as a survivor begging for help. Claire gestured for her to continue, though she already knew what was coming. 3 days ago, the Devourers launched their final assault. 17 Council worlds attacked simultaneously. Our carefully planned defenses, they meant nothing. The creatures had learned from every previous battle. They adapted, they evolved. The envoy's voice broke as she continued. My homeworld of Zenthar Prime held 40 billion souls. It took the Devourers 6 hours to consume everything. The cities, the forests, the oceans, all of it gone. I watched from orbit as our children died. Marshal Tony Lewis, humanity's supreme military commander, entered the room with Admiral Morrison. Both men had aged in the years since exile, but their eyes still burned with the determination that had built an empire from nothing. How many survived? Admiral Morrison asked quietly. Perhaps 10 billion across all species. The rest, Zareth's form shuddered. The Devourers are different now, stronger, smarter. They use our own technology against us, weapons taken from the worlds they've consumed. Claire exchanged glances with her military advisors. This was the moment they had prepared for, but it still felt surreal. The species that had condemned humanity's aggressive nature were now facing extinction because they had rejected that same nature. What exactly are you asking of us? Claire inquired. Zareth straightened, trying to recover some dignity. Full military intervention by the human empire. In exchange, the surviving council governments offer complete surrender. We will accept human leadership, territorial demands, reparations, anything you require. The room fell silent. After 15 years of exile, war, and empire building, the galaxy was offering to bow before humanity. It should have felt like triumph, but Claire found herself thinking of the billions who had died because of council pride. I need to discuss this with my advisors, Claire said finally. You'll be given quarters and medical attention. We'll have an answer within 24 hours. After Zareth was escorted away, Claire turned to face the 3 men who had shaped humanity's response to exile. Admiral Morrison, who had stood firm in the council chamber 15 years ago. Marshal Lewis, who had built the military machine that now dominated the galaxy. Intelligence Chief Tony Lewis, who had transformed humanity's information networks into an unstoppable weapon. Options? She asked simply. Admiral Morrison spoke first, his voice heavy with old pain. We could ignore them. Let the council species face the consequences of their decisions. They chose diplomacy over survival. They chose pride over pragmatism. Perhaps extinction is what they deserve. Marshal Lewis nodded grimly. Our analysis shows we could survive even if the Devourers consume the rest of the galaxy. Our territory is defensible, our technology superior. We could build a fortress empire and wait for the threat to burn itself out. But Intelligence Chief Lewis shook his head. That's thinking small. This is our chance to reshape the entire galaxy. We make them surrender completely, accept human hegemony, and build an empire that will last for millennia. They come to us as beggars, so we make them our subjects. Claire listened to each option, understanding the logic behind all of them. But she also remembered something her predecessor had told her when she took office, that power without purpose was just another form of destruction. There's a fourth option, she said quietly. We save them. All of them. Not because they deserve it, but because it's the right thing to do. The 3 men stared at her in surprise. Admiral Morrison was the first to speak. Madam President, with respect, they exiled us. They called us warmongers and threw us out of civilized space. Why should we risk human lives to save species that condemned us? Claire walked to the window overlooking Iron's Edge's capital city. Below, human children played in parks built on what had once been wasteland. Their parents worked in factories that produced miracles of technology daily. This harsh world had become a paradise through human determination and cooperation. Because, she said finally, if we let them die out of spite, we become the very thing they accused us of being. We become conquerors instead of protectors. The debate that followed lasted 18 hours. Military advisors argued about logistics and casualties. Economic planners calculated the cost of saving 60 worlds. Philosophers debated whether humanity owed anything to species that had rejected them. But in the end, Claire made a decision that would define her species forever. We launch Operation Deliverance, she announced. Full military intervention across all Devourer-occupied territories. Our goal is the complete elimination of the threat and the protection of all surviving populations. Admiral Morrison smiled for the first time in years. And our terms for the Council survivors? They accept human leadership in military matters. They contribute resources to the war effort, and they acknowledge that sometimes the price of peace is the willingness to fight for it. The campaign that followed became legend. Human fleets moved through the galaxy like avenging angels, striking Devourer positions with overwhelming force. The creatures that had seemed unstoppable found themselves facing warriors who understood that some threats could only be met with total commitment. It took 6 months to clear every Devourer from Council space. When the last creature died in the fires of human weapons, 60 worlds had been saved and 10 billion souls rescued from extinction. But the galaxy that emerged from the war was forever changed. Humanity stood at its center not as conquerors, but as the guardians who had proven that strength and compassion could coexist. Admiral Morrison, now elderly and scarred by decades of conflict, stood once again in the Great Hall of Harmony Prime. But this time, he wasn't there as a supplicant begging for understanding. He was there as the representative of the species that had saved them all. The price of peace, he told the assembled aliens, is eternal vigilance. The price of survival is the willingness to fight when fighting is necessary. Humanity was exiled for understanding these truths. Today we return not as conquerors, but as the guardians of a galaxy that finally understands what we always knew. Outside the station, human ships patrolled the trade routes, keeping the peace that their strength had made possible. In the depths of space, monitoring stations watched for new threats, staffed by humans who would never again let civilization be caught unprepared. The exile was over. The empire of war had become the foundation of lasting peace, and humanity had proven that sometimes the greatest mercy is the strength to protect those who cannot protect themselves.